Hi there. Been a while. Been very busy with music and actually car fixes and upgrades and all that stuff and life in general. It's time to make this series finally. A series in memory of Christopher Tolkien, the youngest son of the professor, and without whom we wouldn't have 90% of Tolkien's writings available as books and such. Yeah, it's crazy. He dedicated 40 years of his life or something more. I believe more than that, since he published Silmarillion until, just a couple of years before he passed away. He was still editing and organizing his father's works. Yeah, that's nearly 50 years actually. It's insane, and it's such a dedication, and he could have, used the name to write his own stuff and get money out of it, but no, he just followed his father's legacy. It's such an honorable thing, such an honorable life. Okay, to Christopher. So, personally, I started reading Tolkien when I was about 12 years old. In French, though, and later on in Spanish, by borrowing books here and there from friends and my school's library. I only learned English years later, around, well, I started classes at school at age 12 or 13 actually, but never really cared for it until I got into music deeply, and especially metal music. And yeah, I started from there slowly, and I got a decent level around age 17, something like that, perhaps even earlier, 16 I would say. But it wasn't enough to read Tolkien. It's quite elegant language, and I would read it, and half of the vocabulary I wouldn't understand, so it's not really fun. Around a decade or so, more or less. So that would be, I was in my early adult life, 19, something like that. I came across an old copy of the Silmarillion, which is right here. This is my old copy. It's missing the dust jacket, but I got this for €5. Not even €5, 50 dirhams. That would be €4 and something. And this is a copy from the 80s, and very rare. And when I looked around the value of it on internet back then, it was around 10 times the worth. Yeah, the guy who sold it had no clue what he had in mind, what he had in hand, and I didn't either. I didn't screw him up or something. I had no clue. I just wanted more Tolkien books, because back then I was reading and rereading The Lord of the Rings, of course, the 3 volumes, and The Hobbit. This is a new box that I just got lately. Just arrived about a week ago, I would say. Illustrated by Anna Lee, one and only Anna Lee. Beautiful box, amazing. And yeah, it's the first time I actually own copies of The Lord of the Rings in English, and like for my own money. The Hobbit I bought it before, but in French and Spanish. Never owned it in English until now, and never read it in English. So yeah, the journey has been quite strange, but we'll get to that later. What can I say about these books? I mean, The Lord of the Rings, the greatest fantasy story ever written, period. Even people who lean towards other authors or stuff, they don't even argue about that. It's the greatest story. and some of the greatest writings ever done, at least in the English language, of course. There's tons of videos out there on reviews and opinions of people and different takes on what are the meanings in the story, etc. I'm not here really to do that because, um, I'm not a scholar, and there's even people out there who aren't scholars who did a way better job than I would even attempt to do. So there's no need really. About The Hobbit, it was written and released way before The Lord of the Rings, but rewritten afterwards to make both stories more cohesive and so they can fall more easily into the same world. This was a process, it was a crazy process Tolkien was going through. He didn't intend the both stories to be in the same world until it just came by writing. It's a quite interesting thing. It's very similar to writing music, really, and arranging songs and stuff. Um, yeah, just things you learn in life. As a reader for years, but couldn't play an instrument properly. I didn't have this perspective, but now it's something. One thing I would say that comes to mind very easily, and I always liked this on The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, is that they're written um, from the perspective of the hobbits themselves. They're stories that are written or compiled by the hobbits, and so it's a view from little people or like normal people uh, with a lot of courage and balanced human beings, really, but no real status in the bigger world. But the Silmarillion, I would say, is written as a history book, not a story. It contains a lot of stories. It contains the genesis of the world. It contains the a lot of lore informations, a lot of stories here and there. But the Silmarillion, it's, I would say, written from the perspective of the elves. So they're higher status, I would say, more elegant, and so the wording, and the phrasing and the vocabulary is higher, and that's why it's people say it's a hard read, and I agree. Actually, I've only read it once, uh, from beginning to end, and it was tough. Like I said, I was about 19, and I've only started speaking English a couple of years before that. So, yeah, that was a challenge, but it was fun. I could tell that it's deep, and since then I've read chapters because, like I said, it's not a story, it's history. And you could just take chapters and different parts and read them apart. There's no problem, really. Of course, the full book experience, it's there's nothing that matches that. But hey, you do what you want. The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are the only, more or less, we'll get to that, the only books published in Tolkien's lifetime about Middle-earth, about his world creation. The Silmarillion was released a few years after he passed away, and that was the first book. I think it was the first book edited by his son, Christopher, compiled and edited, and he did a lot of work because there were many versions of the same stories, and he had to compile everything and just decide really for his own what to publish and what not. Uh, it was huge work, and it's not a perfect result. He himself later on explained how he did a couple of mistakes here and there, but overall it's just I mean, just having the book itself, it just brings so much meaning to the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings themselves. Backstory, but beyond that, beyond the backstory, the new stuff we got, it's unbelievable. I mentioned earlier my school's library, and one of the books I read there was Tales from the Perilous Realm. Amazing cover art, illustrated by Anna Lee. There is a lot of sketches in here. It's amazing. And how this relates to Middle-earth? Well, not much actually. There's just one. So this is also a compilation of many stories and one essay called On Fairy Stories, of course written by Tolkien himself, which is an amazing essay. I had shivers a couple of times while reading it, and well, not on this copy actually, because it's published in other places elsewhere. It's a very popular essay, and that's why it's compiled here at the end of the list. On Fairy Stories, you could see it after the stories. Why? Because most here are what we can call fairy stories, except a list of a lot of poems compiled under the Adventures of Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil is a character in The Lord of the Rings. So this is how this book relates to Middle-earth, to The Hobbit, to The Lord of the Rings, etc. The rest of stories, not so much, but you can clearly see, like, you have the bigger picture of Tolkien's mind, if you would say, and his way of writing and creating stories. One more amazing thing about this books that are edited by Christopher and other people also, sometimes. We'll get to that later again. Is that it also always contains an introduction, appendices, commentary by Christopher himself, and he had such an eloquent way of writing his commentary, both quite scholarly and academic, but at the same time very understandable, because we all know, the boring and lame way of academic writing. Most of the time the topic is amazing, but they're so great at making it so boring. Well, Christopher doesn't do that, and he knows his father's mind so well. It's quite incredible. Most of the stories here were published on like magazines and in limited prints before, in Tolkien's lifetime. But it's great that they were compiled here. The introduction in this book was made by the one and only Tom Shippey, one of the greatest Tolkien scholars, and my personal favorite. He's amazing. I believe, so it's getting dark. I'll try to get some light in here. It's not much, but we'll finish soon. I believe the next book I read, I believe I borrowed it from a nerd friend. The Children of Húrin. What is this? Again, illustrated by Anna Lee. I don't just love Anna Lee, you'll see later. There's the three great Tolkien illustrators, Anna Lee, John Howe, and Ted Nasmith. They're all amazing. Actually, I would say my personal favorite would be Ted Nasmith. But they're all amazing. They're just all top-notch. This is one of the stories that was published in the Silmarillion, but it's expanded, so we get more details, more commentary, etc., and of course more illustrations by Anna Lee. The story is amazing, and I would say It's the oh, look at that, beautiful. It's the most dramatic and sad and depressing story Tolkien ever written. Like, there is very little hope in here. No spoilers, but yeah, it's quite known. And I'm not a big fan of those kind of stories, but of course this is Tolkien. That's one of the reasons why I never jumped to read George Martin's Song of Ice and Fire. Sorry, I've always loved Game of Thrones. I loved the series that came out. What's that? A year ago, something like that. House of Dragon. Beautiful, but it never gave me the push to go and buy the books. But I did lately, actually. One day I'll start. It's because it's so crude and there's little hope in there. It's very reality based, and it's not a surprise for most people who know me. I do not like reality. Children of Húrin, one of the three great tales, which is Beren Luthien, Children of Húrin, and Fall of Gondolin. We'll get to those later on other videos. And lastly, I want to talk about today, which I believe, yes, it was the book I read afterwards, but I read it in French. I read it afterwards in English, but only sparsely, never from front to back. And I've only got lately for the first time, my own copy in English. That's the amazing. I love this book. Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth, or yeah, Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth. Again, edited by Christopher Tolkien. This is like the feeling I get from this book when I read it, and it's literally that. Those are mostly unfinished tales, so you would get sometimes not even the beginning of a story, just the middle and the end, or sometimes the opposite, or sometimes just notes, and yeah, just descriptions of places here and there, of people, small stories. It's like a puzzle, and I can only imagine the work Christopher had to do going through this one. This relates to the Silmarillion, to the Lord of the Rings, of course to Children of Húrin, and more books that were published afterwards. This is an amazing book. And what did I say earlier? The three great Tolkien illustrators: Alan Lee, John Howe, Ted Nasmith. They're all here. I love this book. I love this copy. It's like you come across some sort of ancient hidden city that had a library, and you would come across very old manuscripts and pages of books that are way beyond decomposition, and you're trying to decipher what it's saying and stuff like that. This is the feeling you get. Lovely. All right. The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Children of Húrin, Tales of Perilous Realm, and Unfinished Tales. All I've got from the same library in Casablanca, in Morocco. Livre-moi. And the rest of my Tolkien library also. It's like 99% from Livre-moi. Yeah. Support your local stores, people. Whatever it is, really. Good food places, music stores, libraries, whatever. Anything that is good and brings joy in this world. Please keep continuing supporting it. because it's dying away. It has been dying away for a long time, and at some point we'll only have buildings and nothing else. It's gonna be a grey, disgusting world. It already is if you ask some people, but hey, it's still beauty. Just look at the lighting now, and the tree behind me, well, on this window and behind me. That's a beautiful frame, right? It is. Okay, time to go edit this video, and to Christopher Tolkien and to the professor. Cheers. Namarie.